recording so we can put it up on YouTube. Perfect. Okay, Hunter, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Hunter. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Education and Outreach at Self Serve Toys. And we are a brick and mortar retail store in Nob Hill in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and online at selfservetoys.com. So we believe that all bodies are good bodies deserving of love exactly as they are right now. And that as long as you're being safe and consensual with yourself and your partners, that you can have as much or as little intimacy, sex, and relationships as you want without feeling shame, fear, and guilt. And we also know that most of us have not received adequate sex education, how they work, and that we know that it can be really challenging to talk about this topic in our culture because sex is seen as a taboo and is seen as something that you can only talk about in very hushed voices, you know, under the covers with the doors locked, right? And so we know that that can be a really big challenge for us when we have things that we're struggling with, when we have something we want to work on or something we want to explore, that stigma and that taboo can really be a major challenge for a lot of us in really addressing what we need to address. So that's why self-serve is here. We also believe that we deserve access to really good pleasure products. There's no regulation in the adult industry, so it's common to find like plastic softeners in toys and sex toys that are illegal to use in baby and dog toys. So we're looking at things like phthalates and some other plastic softeners. So at self-serve, we're really picky with what we carry. We want to make sure that what you're putting in your body is safe to put in your body, and that we have as much information as possible about the kinds of products that we're carrying. It's our joke and our truth that we have bad sex so you don't have to, because we actually do the challenging work of testing and reviewing most of our toys. There's a lot of really bad toys out there and bad products out there. And what we try to do is make sure that what we have in our inventory is really going to be good for your body, and also is going to work and do what it says it's going to do, and that you don't have to worry quite so much about, you know, is this a safe toy, is this going to be good, is this going to be worth my money. We've done some of that testing for you so that you can have an idea that anything we have in our inventory is going to be, free of phthalates. That's going to be, have been reviewed and tested by someone. So it's probably going to be pretty good. And we also, all of our educators are trained on staff to help you find what's going to be a good fit for you, because we know that everybody's body is different. We're all unique individuals with, we're all coming to the world with very different, outlooks and experiences. So we want to make sure that what we have is going to meet those needs. So that being said, one thing I would love to do is I would love to just maybe, go around the room here. We can do, feel free to introduce yourself with your name. If you want to give your pronouns, that's great too. And just something that, if you have a specific question that's on your mind or something you really want me to talk about, I would love to make sure that I'm addressing your specific concerns or questions if you have any. So I'll give a brief moment at the beginning to voice those, and then we'll also have time at the end in case something comes up as I'm presenting. But it also just gives me a chance to get to know you all a little bit. And also feel free, if you don't have a specific question or anything that you came here to learn today, feel free to just tell me what's something that's been really grabbing your attention recently. Maybe you found a new favorite brand of potato chip, or maybe you have a new show that you really like watching, or maybe you are really obsessed with your dog. I don't know. There's probably something in your life that's garnering a lot of attention, and you can feel free to share that if you don't have a specific question related to the topic. So I'll start, and then I'll just take a brave volunteer for anybody who wants to go first. But like I said, my name is Hunter, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm here because I really like to help people find their voice and their comfort level when it comes to talking about sex and sexuality. I know that for most of us, this can be a challenging, complex topic. And then you add in all the other stuff that life throws at us, and it just gets more challenging and more complex. So I really want to help you find your voice around sex and sexuality so that you can advocate for yourself and you can really live the life that is best suited for you. So that's a little bit about me. So I'll let someone feel brave and go first. And like I said, just name, pronouns, and anything you want me to cover today, or you know, something that's really exciting you recently?
Hunter, I'll jump. Oh, sorry, Rebecca, you want to go?
I'll go first because I was one person who really wanted this topic. I asked Allison about it and she was like, actually, I was like, yay. So I'm Rebecca and I use she, her pronouns. And so I'm going through menopause right now because of cancer treatment. I was not in menopause before cancer treatment. So I've just been really interested in like preventing vaginal atrophy and also dealing with vaginal dryness and just making sure like to avoid any kinds of infections. I don't have a partner, so so there's that piece too, but just wanted to learn more about just to kind of keep everything well and healthy down there, so I don't have to worry about it, because I'm actually a little bit nervous about that happening now. And so I was just like, oh, I'm a little afraid.
Yeah, well, that's I'll spend a lot of time talking about that specifically. And one thing I didn't mention is that we do a lot of work with healthcare providers, and we have a lot of folks sending us patients who are specifically either maybe post chemo, post treatment. Also, like there's lots of reasons why someone might need to consider, dilation and atrophying and all these things. So we have almost every day, someone coming to us saying, "Hi, my doctor sent me to you, and I need these things." So it's something that we talk about regularly, and it's really one of my favorite parts of my job is that we get to help people when they're like, "What's going on with me and my body? I'm a little bit confused," or like, "I don't know how to manage this well." So I'm really glad that you're here. I'm so excited that you wanted this information, and just thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, and I also will be starting an aromatase inhibitor here pretty soon, so that'll even decrease my estrogen even more. So anyway, Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Rebecca.
So Hunter, I'm happy to go next. Allison, hi guys. So I think I just wanted to reiterate, much of what we've talked about when we invited you to come join us this evening. But I think kind of to echo on what Rebecca's saying, I think a lot of us found ourselves in literally instant menopause, like flick a switch, chemo number 2, and there you go. And so your body doesn't, and you don't have the ability to sort of acclimate over time to what those changes look like. And so in addition to the vaginal atrophy and the dryness and all of those things is also a diminished sex drive, because our hormones for most of us, many of us are PR positive, and those have been shut down. And it's just not something that I find gets really discussed in the oncological realm with, your oncologist or your radiation oncologist or any of those things. And so the questions kind of keep coming up throughout our support groups. And I think a lot of us are experiencing the same things, and where is there, a safe channel to have these discussions and to garner the necessary information. So, so I think for me, that's certainly why I'm here and why we invited you to be here. And we're just thrilled that you are here. So thank you for sharing your time and talents with us.
Awesome. Thank you. And I definitely will talk about sex drive and desire and libido and all of those things, because there's so many different things they can be impacted by, and it's really normal and really common just when you go through any big life change, that your body's like, "Hey, hold on, I'm not quite like things have changed here too," right? And sometimes it can be really startling and surprising, on top of everything else that you're dealing with. So we'll definitely talk about that as well. All right, does anybody else want to share?
I'll go. Hi, I'm Annie, and so I'm really happy that you're here. And one of the main issues that I have is that I lost a breast because of breast cancer, and because those were, my breasts were part of foreplay and things like that. I just want to know, how do I get through foreplay now? How do I do that without that part of it? That's what I really want to learn about is what other types of foreplay can I do now that I've lost that ability.
Yeah,
And I'm
that makes a lot of
going
sense.
through- And I'm also going through menopause too, and we'll be having I'm having ovaries removed, and so I know that's going to have a lot to do with my desire to even want to be intimate, and so I don't want to lose any of that. So whatever you can teach us, I'm excited to learn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I'll go. This is Rebecca, and I'll just say ditto to everything that was said. And I elected to have a double mastectomy, so I really don't recognize my body anymore. And I've had terrible vaginal atrophy and dryness, and I don't know, it's kind of like when I've discussed it with the doctor, either the reaction is, well, it's not really life-threatening, or the gynecologist looks at me like I'm old. And yeah, I am a little bit older. My husband and I had a very nice, intimate sex life before all of this. And so now, I mean, not to be too graphic, but I mean, it just won't even work. I mean, there's just no way. I don't care how hard I try. So
Yeah. We can definitely talk about that. That portion about not even recognizing your body is really real, and I just want to validate that that as our bodies change in lots of different ways, because there's so many different ways that our bodies can change due to something, like breast cancer, or due to other things, that it can feel like you're having to get to know this whole new body, and that can feel like a lot of really challenging work on top of everything else that you're struggling with or dealing with. So I just want to validate that you all, it's a lot to have on your plate all at once. So we can definitely talk through these issues, and talk through what you're going through, and I can also give you some ideas of how to how to sort of move through them and how to explore in a way that feels good for you. And I will say that most of the customers that I talk to are like, yeah, my doc, like a lot of the people are like, yeah, my doctor kind of said that like I just shouldn't really worry about it, but like I want to worry about it because I want to have a sex life,
Yeah.
and like there are people well into their 80s and 90s who are having amazing sex, right? And
Yeah.
so it's not like
Right.
it just goes away. It's just that our bodies change, our desire changes, and we can just learn how to adapt to that change instead of this idea that like we just become like non-sexual all of a sudden, which I think is how a lot of people would like to think that it works, but that's not true. Awesome. Anybody else want to share?
There it goes. Okay, I'm Roberta, and I ditto what everybody else is saying. I'm 9 years out. Have been kind of fighting this fight for a while. I did come to your center last week and talk to one of the girls, and so we'll see what happens. But I'm excited to have you here and listen to what you have to say, and looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I concur with everything everybody's saying. And I'm just so happy that we have a safe space to talk about this. I just feel like nobody talks about their vagina. And I always joke with my friends now, we need to be vagina advocates. So just happy that we're here and can talk about it, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Hunter.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think I think based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like we've got, what I want to talk to you all about is what you all want to learn about. So I just always like to give a little bit of time to make sure. So we'll go ahead and dive into the topic, but I'm the kind of, oh yeah, go for it.
I know that Lacey spoke up, and if she wanted to share, I just wanted to make sure.
Sorry, yeah.
Not to put you on the hot seat, Lacey. If you don't want to, don't. But I know that you unmuted yourself. So if you did, I just wanted to make sure we didn't, skip you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Lacey. I'm 30 years old. I've had a long-term boyfriend for quite some time now. I had a double mastectomy, but for me, it's kind of like the motivation to have sex. I'm never motivated anymore.
And then when we do have sex, it's extremely painful. So just how to get through that. Like we use lubrication, but that doesn't seem to work.
30 years old.
It's just not fun. It's painful, and I don't want it to be like that. I still have my whole life ahead of me, so I want to figure out how to fix it.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I think all of this ties really well into what we're going to talk about, because it all, you know, the lubrication is a big part of it. I tell people, like, lubrication can get you a lot of places, but there's other things too. You know, there's other things aside from lube that can really help deal with discomfort and pain. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Awesome. And did anybody else want to share before we dive in? All right. Well, I think, and I just want to check, we're going till 6:30, or was it 7?
I mean, we tentatively schedule for an hour, but if it goes over, I mean,
okay,
we
that's
can
what I thought. I just
support that too.
Okay, cool. I think that'll be perfect for timing. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't like trying to rush through it and then you're like, we're here until 7. So I just wanted to make sure. Okay,
we will
great.
hold space
So
for you as long as you need it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I think one of the places that I want to start about is sort of zooming way out. And I'm going to pose to you a question, and you can either feel free to type your answer into the chat, or you can feel free to unmute and you know, give your response verbally. But I want to ask you, and I want you to think about, and this might be something you want to take notes on. Maybe you digest this question over the next few days. But the question I'm going to ask you is, question number 1 is, what is sex? And then the other question is, what does sex give me? So the first question is, what is sex? And the second question is, what does sex give me? And this is supposed to be a challenge. If somebody's like, oh, I know what sex is, like immediately, then I'm like, please, by all means, speak up. And if someone wants to feel brave, okay, awesome. Someone said in the chat that sex is a connection. Absolutely. And I think that's such a beautiful, like, broad way to think about it, you know, and I really appreciate that bigness. Like when we think of sex as not just one kind of thing, but like lots of kinds of things, and those things get, you know, our connection. I think that's a really, really on point answer. What else are you all thinking? What is sex, and what does sex give me?
So sex to me is intimacy. It's that it is a connection, and it's that time that I get to spend with my husband, just he and I. I mean, you know, with work and kids and all of that, that's sex for us it's intimate, and it should be enjoyable.
Yeah, and you get that moment to like turn everything else off. You know, you get to leave the job and the kids and the cleaning and all of that. You get to leave it outside and just focus on you.
Correct.
Yeah. And someone else said in the chat, sex gives me warm and fuzzy feelings. Absolutely. Yes. Someone else has said, sex is fun. Absolutely. Yeah. What else is sex? Maybe is it sex when you're just using your hands? Is it sex when it's just you touching yourself? I mean, they call it solo sex for a reason, right? Same thing with a term like oral sex. Is oral sex sex? I mean, I would say so because it's that last name is sex, you know? Okay, so then a second question is, typically, what is, like, how are we told to think about sex? What are we supposed to think sex is? What are we told? Like, sex is blank. What is it? Culturally, we can even talk about activities. We can talk about body parts. When they teach you sex education, if you got sex education, what kinds of sex were they talking about?
I think generally, you know, when you think of like what we were told sex is, which I don't actually believe this to be true, but what we're told is that it's intercourse between a man and a woman and
right,
procreation. I don't,
right.
That's not my definition of it, but that is what we're told.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, what we're told typically is that sex is what I call like PIV, meaning like penis and vagina, right? And that sex is like when this thing goes into that thing, and then that's sex, right? For lots of reasons, that's not an adequate definition, including lots of us have, right? Lots of us have sex and there's never penetration involved. Lots of us have sex and, you know, there might never be orgasms. So, you know, culturally and in things like media and in porn and in all of these different representations of sex, we're told that sex is this, and that if you're not doing this, it's not sex. And then when our bodies change, when, you know, things happen in our life that make it so that we're not interested, you know, in maybe the kinds of sex that we used to have. One of the things that I think is really cool about this opportunity is that we get to define sex for ourselves. And probably what that means is you get to redefine sex. You know, so you get to decide, you know, hey, if you want to sit on that side of the bed and I want to sit on this side of the bed, and we both get our favorite toys out and we have some fun, like on ourselves, but watching each other, like to me, that's sex, because we have intimacy, we have connection, and there's pleasure involved, right? And again, that doesn't have to be your definition of sex, but I know that for me, that pleasure and intimacy and connection, those are the things that I need to feel for it to be sex in my mind. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about how you are going to redefine sex. And I want you to think about all of the activities that can include. And then when I tell you I want you to think about all of the activities that can include, maybe that's a little bit overwhelming for you, because turns out there's a lot of things that you can do. So there's a tool for this, and it's called a yes, no, maybe checklist. And I'm going to post the link in the chat. So this link will take you to a very old version of our website. That's not our current website, but it holds this blog post, and this blog post is very important at this point. So this is a collection of yes, no, maybe checklists that I have found that I really like. And a yes, no, maybe checklist is basically a list of behaviors and activities. And then next to each behavior is a little checkbox for yes, a little checkbox for no, and a little checkbox for maybe. So what that does is it basically lets you relax, so that you're not trying to think of like, okay, well, I want to think about all these things that I might want to try that are outside of, you know, a specific kind of penetration or intercourse. And what are those things, right? It can be challenging to try and think of everything under the sun, right? That could give you intimacy and connection. So a yes, no, maybe checklist is kind of nice because it does some of that work for you. There are some lists that are a little bit more geared towards like BDSM and kink. And there's some lists that are more geared towards like relationships. And there's some lists that are geared more towards different types of touch. But ideally, what you would do is you would find a list that you think fits your needs well. And then you would print that list off, and you would go over these activities and check whether you would be a yes, a no, or a maybe to the behavior. And some of the lists have more than those three options. Some of the lists have an option like, I want to fantasize about it, but I don't want to do it. Or like, I want to fantasize about it and I might want to do it, but I don't want to do it yet. Right? So there's lots of different places where you can be on these different activities and behaviors. But, you know, it can include things like giving a massage, getting a massage, you know, spanking. It could be dirty talk. It could be, you know, role play. It could be all of these different things that increase intimacy and connection and pleasure, but it's not just that one kind of sex that we are culturally told is like actual sex. So a yes, no, maybe checklist is great because you fill it out on your own by yourself. And then you bring it together with your partner and they have filled out their list on their own. And then you find out where are your mutual yeses and your mutual maybes. So what that does is it gives you create a third list that's your shared yeses and your shared maybes. And that's kind of where you can work from. And ideally, what we're trying to do is we're trying to broaden the definition of sex. So, when you're saying like, I'm just not feeling the desire, I'm not feeling the drive or the urge to have sex in the way that I used to. Well, there's other options too. Maybe you don't want to have sex like intercourse or penetration right now, but like maybe sitting there and having your feet rubbed would feel really nice. Or maybe sitting there and like dirty talking in each other's ear feels really good. Or maybe you want to sit together and read erotica. Or maybe you want to try mutual masturbation, right? So when we really broaden our definition of what sex is, it gives us so many more options so that we're not just relying on ourselves to always be like in the mood for this one type of sex, right? That for most of us, we're like, I want the connection, I want the intimacy, I might even want the pleasure, but maybe penetration hurts right now. Maybe it doesn't feel good to have somebody's body pressure on my body right now. Maybe I just need a little bit more space than what that kind of sex can give me. So let's find other activities that we can do together that give us that intimacy and give us that connection. But it doesn't mean that like, just because I'm saying no to a certain kind of sex means that I'm saying no to everything, right? And you can say no to vaginal penetration, but you can say yes to, someone rubbing a feather all over your body, right? Or you can say yes to someone, rubbing your feet with massage oil, or you can say yes to watching your partner masturbate or using toys with them. That can be really fun and give you a lot of connection, but you're not doing the thing that maybe doesn't feel good in that moment. So I want to hear what you all think of this idea of a yes, no, maybe checklist. Has anybody ever used one before? Have you heard of it before? No? Okay, awesome. Well, I think it can be a really fun date night actually, is to like print off, everybody gets their own list, print off your list, and then you go through and you check yes, no, and maybe to the various activities. And then you come back together and you make your third list that gives you all of the options that you both are a yes or a maybe to. It's important to know that this list is flexible, it's pliable, it will change. You might find that 2 years later, you fill out your list again, and then you compare your first list and your second list, and you're like, well, look at that. Some of the things that were on my no list at first are now on my maybe and my yes list. Right? So it's totally okay if your desires change. It's also totally okay if the things that were on your yes and your maybe list go over to the no side, right? The point is that we're having a regular check-in with ourselves and our bodies to determine what we feel most comfortable with. And also recognizing that our desires will change throughout our lifetime. And that's a really normal part of all of this. And that's something else that I want to normalize is that, our bodies and our desires change and our hormones change throughout our lifetime, no matter what we're going through. And there's ways that we can adapt to those changes and meet ourselves and meet our own needs as well as the needs of our partners. Sometimes we just have to get a little bit creative, but that's what people like me are here for. And we can definitely, we can kind of help with that creativity part. I'm lucky that I get paid to do that. So I get paid to be creative and try and help people find creative ways to build intimacy and connection. Okay, so a yes, no, maybe checklist, I think is a really good resource. And I'll put it just here again in the chat in case there's anybody who joined after I posted it. But fill that out with by yourself and then have your partner fill one out, come together and find out what are your mutual yeses and your maybes. And then you all can kind of find some fun places to play and it gives you more options. So that's my goal today, is to give you more options so that sex doesn't just mean one kind of thing, that sex can really mean a lot of different kinds of things. Additionally, it's important to notice that, sex does not have to be about orgasm. I would say that sex is about pleasure, not orgasm. So in the same way that, we talk to people who have penises who for one reason or another, you know, their erections maybe don't start to not work as much as they used to, or in the same way that they used to, you know, and I have this conversation all the time too. You know, people come in and they're like, my erection is not what it used to be, and I don't know what to do about that. And, you know, it's not that. What I tell people is, I'm like, well, first of all, we don't need to have erections to have fun, right? Lots of pleasure can be had without an erect penis. And if you're convinced that you need to have an erection to have fun, I highly recommend you check out like queer and lesbian sex, because that's lots of fun too. And there is not an erection in sight. That's what sex toys are for, right? I've got a whole wall of, you know, 30 plus dildos that never go soft. So even if your erection does go soft at a time where you didn't want it to, like, don't worry, we've got backups, right? We've got hands, we've got mouths, we've got toys, we've got backups, right? Same thing here. We've got other things we can do if vaginal penetration just doesn't feel good, or your body's not ready for that right now. There's so many other options that we have, and I want to give you all those options and really this is a really good place to sort of start that conversation, and kind of get an idea of what you might want to try. Now, that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about lubricants, because lubricants are really, really important. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about toys as well, because toys actually are really important. So for a lube, you want to make sure that you find something that's really going to be a good fit with your body. And like a lot of commercial based lubes are oftentimes have like glycerin in them, which can feel really sticky and tacky, and it can kind of exacerbate just that it doesn't feel good on the body. It can exacerbate yeast infections and other things. So we want to be careful with what we're putting in our bodies, and finding a good glycerin-free and paraben-free lube is probably going to be a good fit. So this is our top-selling lube. It's called Sutil. My demo bottle's a little bit dirty, but it's basically a really, really it's all paraben free, it's all glycerin free, and this was made by somebody who spent years trying to find a lube that she liked, and then instead she was like, I'm just going to make my own lube. And that was probably over 15 years ago, and now she's been making our top selling lube since we opened the store. And it's called Sutil, and it has hyaluronic acid in it, so that basically is just something that helps draw moisture into the cells and draw water into the cells, which is really good because that dryness is really intense, you know, and especially, you know, if you're just already dehydrated as it is. I'm gonna put links into the chat, not because I'm trying to be weird and salesy and like sell you things, but I want you to be able to see what I'm talking about. Like normally I would just pass the bottle around, but I can't do that right now. So I'm going to be putting links into the chat of what I'm talking about, so you can feel free to go and read a little bit more about it at a different time if you want to. But this one has the hyaluronic acid in it, which is really nice because that means it's going to be drawing water into the cells. So it's going to just last a little bit longer and be wetter. And the consistency is really great because it's very similar to one's natural fluid. So I had to just protect my keyboard there for a second because I'm going to sort of put this down my finger so you can kind of see the consistency of this lube. It's pretty drippy. But there is another one that's a little bit less drippy and a little bit more thick, but it's really nice and slick. So you can see that, you know, it kind of sticks around for quite a while. And really the nice thing about lube is that especially if you're using it internally, it'll stick around for a little bit longer versus a lube that dries up really fast. People always come into the store, and pre-COVID times, we had all of our tester bottles out so you could like smell and taste things. And we're in the process of reopening the store right now. We had to do a lot of hiring and training, so we're not actually open to the public just yet, but we're doing curbside pickup and online orders. But one of the things I always tell people is like, especially like if you live in New Mexico and you're dehydrated and maybe you're on medication and right, all of these things that can really increase dryness, like finding a really good lube is going to be very, very important. So this is one lube, and it's kind of, you can still see it there. It's still quite slick. It'll go away. It'll dissipate the more I rub it in. So if I use it like lotion, it kind of dries up pretty fast. But the nice thing about water-based lube is that you can actually reactivate it with water. So you could either just keep like an ice cube by the bed or a spray bottle or a glass of water even, and just kind of dip your hand in it and then put it wherever the lube was, and that actually reactivates the lube. instead of just putting more and more lube on. Sometimes that can get kind of sticky, even if there isn't any glycerin in the lube. But reactivating it actually is going to make your lube last for longer, and it's also going to, you know, just help with making it nice and slick again, if it's not feeling as slick as it was. So that's a water-based lube. Water-based lube is great because it feels really wet, you know, so that moist, wet feeling that a lot of people really enjoy as part of their sex. Water-based lube will give you that. The downside of water-based lube is that it will absorb into your skin and it will dry up faster, because especially if you're dehydrated and maybe there's a fan on in the bedroom or whatever, it will dry up faster in those circumstances. If you want something that will not dry up as fast, I recommend getting a silicone-based lube. So this one has a kind of similar, you know, consistency as, oopsies, the other one. You can see it drips down my finger a little bit slower, but it still drips down pretty fast. But this is actually a silicone-based lube, and you'll see it kind of looks almost like an oil, but there's no oil in it. So it's really nice and slick and shiny for a very, very long time. Now, sometimes silicone-based lube can be like too slick for too long, right? So if you're ever feeling like a silicone-based lube is just too much, you can actually like put it in your hair and it'll make your hair nice and shiny. You can like rub it around if you ever have any areas of your body where chafing is an issue. It's really nice for that. But silicone-based lube is really great because it lasts a lot longer. And you can actually use it in water. So if you're doing any kind of you know, play in water, you can absolutely use it in water, whereas a water-based lube will just kind of wash away. So that's one of the downsides of water-based lube, but definitely one of the upsides of a silicone-based lube. And I just put the lube, the Uber lube link in the chat. It looks like this, a little glass bottle. But yeah, that's a silicone-based lube. And a lot of people find that sometimes using a little bit of silicone-based lube, I have a lot of people who use silicone-based lube daily, and it's just like they put it on in the morning when they get up, and it just helps with any kind of dryness or chafing or rubbing that just is a natural part of their day. And then if they want to add, you know, anything else, they might add like a water-based lube on top to give that kind of wet feeling, right? So sometimes using a combination of lubes can help give you just the right amount of like slickness that you want. And you might find that you need both, right? So that's just a good thing to think about. The water-based lube is really nice because it kind of protects the tissue really well. And that's another common change, is that the vaginal tissue just becomes, there's a word that I'm thinking of and I can't think of it right now, but basically the vaginal tissue becomes thinner and can damage more easily. So I think I oftentimes will use a silicone-based lube like at first as like a primer, and then the water-based lube is kind of like goes on top to make it nice and cushiony and nice and wet.
Ask you a question.
Of course, yeah.
So what do you think about, and I haven't, of course, done any of that since all of this has started, but a lube that like a heating kind of lube that warms up. In the past, I've liked that, but I don't know how my body would react to that now.
Right.
So what do you think of that?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, so what do you think about that?
So I would say that if you liked it in the past, it's worth trying. But what I would say is go low and slow, you know, so maybe try just a little bit in one place, you know, like before you take a bunch and rub it all over, you know, just try a little bit and maybe even try a little bit like outside of a sexual situation, you know, so like just put a little bit on and maybe, you know, maybe you're taking a bath or, you know, reading a book or something, but just kind of notice like, okay, this is how it feels when I'm not doing anything, you know, and then maybe if you don't have any reaction to that or you like the reaction, right? Then maybe you could try a little bit more like during some kind of, you know, intimacy or connection. But I would say, you know, if you liked it before, it's very possible you will like it now, but just starting off really slow and just with a tiny bit, because that's with any of those sensation creams or lubes, it's one of those things where you can always put more on. It's a little bit harder to take it off if you've gotten it on, right? And then you could be like, oh, too hot, too hot, too hot, right? So it's best to start with just a little bit, and then you could add up if you decide that you really like it.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, so there are other kinds of lubes as well, but silicone and water-based are the ones that I typically recommend for folks, especially if you're just kind of starting out. There are oil-based lubes. Some people's bodies do okay with oil. Some people's bodies do not like oil in them vaginally. So I'd say if you tend to be more sensitive, maybe try the silicone or water-based first. But we do have some really good pH balanced oil-based lubes, which are good unless you're using any kind of latex barriers. Latex and oil do not go well together, and the oil will break the latex. So just keep that in mind if you're using any kind of latex barriers, that you do not want to use any kind of oil-based lube. Okay, so, and there's also lots of different consistencies of lube as well. So if you want something that's a little bit thicker than some of the lubes that I showed you, Sutil makes a thicker version. It's called Sutil Rich, and it's very like, you'll drip it on you. And I don't have a bottle with me right now, so I can't show you, but you know, if I put it on my finger, I could keep the drop and the drop would not drop down. It would just like stay on my finger. Like it's very, very thick like that. So if you think that that kind of consistency might be a better fit for you, you want something that's a little bit longer lasting or that has a little bit more of that cushion, the Sutil Rich might be a really good option.
And what, I'm sorry.
I love questions. As many as you bring, get them to me.
So what about consuming them? I mean, what happens in that case if the two that you showed us, what happens if they're, I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to chug a bottle of it, but you know, what happens if I consume some?
Yeah. No, absolutely. They're all safe to be consumed. You know, similarly, I wouldn't recommend like taking shots of them or drinking a glass of it, you know, but it's absolutely fine. Like you will get some in your mouth, and they're made to be used orally as well. Yeah, awesome. But that's a great question though. Okay, cool. So now what I'm going to talk a little bit about is we're going to talk a little bit about toys, and then we're going to open it up to some questions. So one of the most common toys that I have healthcare providers send people to self-serve to learn about is a dilator set. So oftentimes after a chemotherapy treatment, or after chemotherapy and after lots of other things too, but like after you have like a hysterectomy, and sometimes after different kinds of pelvic floor issues, also after some kinds of sexual assaults, basically, our bodies can just kind of like stop, right? And especially if we're not doing penetration for a little while, your muscles can atrophy, and then when you go back and try to do penetration again, your body's like, no, like we don't do that, and especially not like that. So it's really normal to have pain during penetration, like I said, if you've gone through chemo treatment and other things. So what we always want to do is we really want to take several steps back and start really slow and really small, and then gradually build up to larger things. So this is a dilator set. It has a vibrator in it, and this is really nice because a lot of the dilator sets that we see, like the medical dilator sets, they're like $200 or $300 and they don't vibrate. And I'm like, that is a shame, you know, because here's the thing: is that vibration is really going to help in the process. Because what we're looking for is something that will increase blood flow. We're looking for something that will help the muscles relax. And we're also looking for something that's really going to sort of engage, you know, the pelvic floor muscles in a way where they can kind of build up to relaxing so much that they actually can receive penetration. So this is a vibrating dilator set. You can kind of hear it. I'll put it up to my headset. Maybe you can hear it a little bit, it's buzzing. But basically it's got a little dial on the bottom there, and you can turn it off and on. And it's made out of hard plastic. But the cool thing about this toy is that it actually has these little, or not so little, the bigger sheaths that you can put on. So this is the smallest one. And then here's the next bigger one. And that just kind of clips in there. And then we have the third one that kind of clips on there. And then you, of course, don't have to use the biggest one, but it is an option. If you want to go big, then you can use that option, right? So this is 4 different toys, diameters, and you know, lengths of toy, all in one toy, which is really great. And it also comes with Oh, it looks like I actually don't have it in my demo kit at home, but it actually comes with a soft jelly sleeve that you can put on top of this in case you don't like the feeling of the hard plastic. So that little jelly sleeve that goes on top can just be a little bit softer. So again, if you're experiencing pain with penetration, you might want to try softer toys because that can be a sort of a better start. But a dilator set is really helpful and really common as sort of, treatment post chemo, because again, it just gives our bodies really a chance to warm up. And what we talk about is like, think of this like your exercise routine. So, doing this 3 to 5 times a week. And what you do is you really, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reassociate how our body and our brain reacts to touch in a place where there might normally be pain, right? So we actually have to kind of retrain our brains that like, oh, it can feel good when I'm touched in this way. And starting off with just you doing this to yourself is going to help give you the sort of groundwork that you need. And then you can add a partner back in, and then maybe you can add a partner using the dilator on you. And then maybe you add a partner using fingers on you. And then maybe later on down the road, you might add a partner using something else on you, right? But the idea is that we don't just expect our bodies to like be ready to do what they were doing before, because our body has gone through a major change and a major trauma. So it would be unfair of us to expect our bodies to just snap, be right back there. And a dilator can really help because you can start really small. And we always recommend, like, if you have a bathtub, like drawing yourself a nice warm bath, starting with external stimulation first. A lot of people make the mistake of just immediately trying to go for penetration. But if you're a person with a vulva, the majority of the nerve endings where you experience pleasure are actually on the outside of your body. So you can do a lot of stimulation just hanging out outside. And 50 to 75% of people with a vulva report that they don't actually experience orgasm through internal penetration, and that they need external stimulation in order to have an orgasm. So what I tell people is like, set a 5 to 10 minutes on your timer and spend those first 5 to 10 minutes in the bath just playing outside, just using your fingers or maybe using some lube and a toy maybe, and just touching yourself on the outside. And you can kind of think about if like the clitoris was a clock and like the clitoris was the face of the clock, and then there's like 1 o'clock, 2, it goes all around. Really play with the different areas that feel good for you for external stimulation. Oftentimes people have a spot that feels most intense for them. Sometimes it's around 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock on their clock. But you might find that you have a spot on your body that when you hang out there for a little while, you're like, oh, hey, that is cool. That feels good when I touch that spot. And the nice thing about vibrators is that they make all of this so much easier. If you're the kind of person who maybe has tried to use your hands for self-pleasure and you're kind of like, meh, I don't know, like that's really normal. That's why vibrators exist. And that vibrators were actually originally used as a medical device. And they were used back when people used to think that hysteria was a legitimate illness. People would send their hysterical wives to the doctor, and the doctor basically would use their hands to bring them to climax and bring them to orgasm. And then the doctors were like, shit, this is hard. My arm hurts, my hand hurts, And so then Oster and some of these other like home appliance companies were the people to make some of the first vibrators. And then doctors were like, wow, this is a lot easier. Like the first vibrator was steam powered. And I'm really glad there's been a lot of technological innovation since then. But basically, doctors were like, wow, this is really challenging to do this with just my hands. I wish there was a device. People created a device. And then some of these companies were like, oh, wait, we could just sell these to people for use in their own homes. And then we had vibrators in our homes. So vibrators really are a medical device, and there's been so much innovation with toys recently that it means now we have vibrators that are much more effective at what they're supposed to do. So let me just show you a few of the toys you might want to consider. So this is an external vibrator. We call it the Gemstone, and it's rechargeable. It's waterproof. It's medical grade silicone on the outside. So it's a little bit soft, a little bit squishy, but then there's a plastic casing underneath it. So this is a really good toy for external stimulation because it's nice and flat and it's nice and broad. And what we want to do with external stimulation is we really want to try and reach as many of the nerve endings as possible just externally. So you could kind of press this toy, if this was sort of the, the clitoris is right here and these are the lips, you can kind of just press this toy up against the various areas of your body that feel good. Again, you're kind of thinking of your clock, and you can really play with different kinds of sensation, right? So you can play with the speed. So maybe you're rubbing it up and down and you maybe try going faster or slower. You can play with pressure, right? So if you think of on a scale from 1 to 5, how hard am I pressing this toy against me? And maybe you find that like, well, it feels pretty good when I press it a little bit harder. That might be your thing. You might like that pressure, or you might not like the pressure, but really giving yourself the ability to experiment with touch so that we're not just focused on penetration. So we've got speed, we've got pressure, we've got like friction. Some people like more friction, some people don't like friction. So lube can really help with that component. But you want to think about all of these different variables of pleasure and what do I need to adjust so that it feels pleasurable? Because again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of retrain our bodies into thinking that like, oh right, touch in this area does not have to be painful. It's not always painful. And when I get to control how it's happening, I have this biofeedback. So I know when it starts to feel a little bit full, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few steps back. So let's say you've done this size for 2 weeks and you're like, all right, I'm ready for the next size. You put the next size on, you start and then it kind of hurts and you're like, oh, no. I was not ready. That's okay. You can just take it off and go back to the other size, right? So that's a big point when we're talking about, using toys and just any kind of stimulation is building up really slowly and really gradually. And then if something doesn't feel good, moving back and really using your breath, using your breathing to relax, to calm. But I oftentimes will recommend, spend 5 to 10 minutes when you're doing your dilation therapy just externally. And then you might find that, oh, actually that does start to feel pretty good when I'm given the proper warm up, right? So for a lot of people, we just haven't figured out what are exactly the right buttons to press, or the buttons have changed. Maybe these buttons used to work years ago, but now when I try and press those buttons or my partner tries and press those buttons, it just doesn't feel the same. So giving yourself that opportunity to kind of, advance and move back is really, really important. I'm going to just put some of the links in the chat to the things that I have talked about so that you all can look them up. Here's the Dilator Set. And then here is the Gemstone. And that's just a rechargeable, external vibrator. And then another type of vibrator that you might want to think about is actually what's called a suction toy. So what it does is it creates a little bit of suction in here it has this little plate that pulses back and forth. And this is really just meant for external stimulation. So you just kind of put this up against the clitoris and it's basically just pushing air up against the clitoris really fast and it can feel really good. So again, there's lots of other kinds of sensations that you can experiment with outside of penetration to see what feels good, because penetration might be the thing that you work up to last. It might be the thing that you take a while to get to because again, your body needs that time. But typically spending, 3 to 5 days doing regular dilation, 3 to 5 days a week doing that regular dilation therapy, over time can make it so that, oh, now your body's a little bit more used to these sensations and it associates this kind of touch with pleasure and not just with pain. And that you might find that over time, your body is a little bit more able to do penetration maybe in the way that you want to. And we have now discovered that penetration is not the only goal of sex and that we can have a lot of other goals around sex that can feel really good as well. Okay, so I think the last thing I'm going to talk about real quick before I do questions is sometimes also we need to get at a certain spot, and sometimes we have trigger points that are really uncomfortable. So this is a Therawan. It's an acrylic wand that you can use to get really specific angles inside. So oftentimes people will sort of recommend this in case there's a particular area or spot that's particularly tender or painful, sometimes somebody might recommend something like a Therawan, because this angle is really curved. That means you can get really good self-stimulation. It starts nice and small. It has this kind of tapered tip, you can see, and then this one's a little bit larger. So that's kind of the tip that you would move up to over time, but you might start with the smaller end. So a Therawan is something else that we recommend a lot for folks. Okay, so I'm going to put some time for questions. There's a few more links that I want to put into the chat that talk a little bit more about desire and that talk about orgasm. But basically, one of the really important things that I always tell people is that, we there's different types of responses to arousal. Some people are like spontaneously aroused, whereas some people need to build in their arousal, right? So think about it like a microwave and a solar oven, right? They both cook, but the microwave's going to be a little bit more instant and the solar oven's going to be a little bit more gradual. So you might find that there are certain things that are very arousing to you, and maybe your path to arousal is like having the dishes done, right? Maybe you're like, hey, if the dishes are done, I might get turned on, right? Or maybe your path to arousal is like reading erotica. Maybe your path to arousal is being out in nature, right? But oftentimes we find that what we find arousing, it might change as our hormones change, but additionally, we might just need to figure out, oh, that used to feel good for me, but not so much anymore. So there's a really great book called, wait, where did it just go? Called Come As You Are, and I'm going to drop it into the chat here. Just a moment. Here we go. So this is basically and arousal that I think is probably the most comprehensive and like scientifically accurate information that we have about orgasm and arousal. And there's also a workbook that you can buy separately that's really great as well. So that's a really phenomenal book around just the desire component, because oftentimes our desire is related to a lot of other things and it's complex, so desire is not like a, and people will definitely try and sell you the pills. They will try and sell you the pills of like, just, take this pill and then you'll feel arousal. But arousal is tied to our emotions. It's tied to our hormones. It's tied to our physical body. It's tied to our mental health, right? It's tied to our surroundings. It's tied to our sense of safety. All of those things are tied to your arousal. So Come As You Are can kind of help you suss out some of that information. And maybe you might figure out that like, oh, in order for me to be aroused, I really, I need to make sure I need to be out of the house. Maybe we need to go rent a hotel room for a night. And you know what? That's okay. Like sometimes we just need to get out of our spaces to let our brains relax. Sometimes we need very specific triggers to sort of get us there. So Come As You Are, I think, is a really good guide into helping people just figure that out a little bit more. And then the other book that I want to give you all, we're out of stock of it right now, so I'm just going to give you the author's website, but it's Dr. Ann Katz, and Woman, Cancer, Sex is the book. And it's basically a self-help guide for women with cancer. So we oftentimes do carry this book. We just don't have it today, but I wanted to make sure that you all could get access to it in case you did want it. So that's a really good book as well. So those are two of the books that I wanted to recommend. So now I want to give, the last few minutes to any questions that might have come up as I did a lot of talking at you. So is there anything you want me to expand upon?
This was just really great and really informative. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm so glad that I'm so glad that you found it helpful and that it was informative for you. And this is definitely like scratching the surface. There's a lot more beyond this, but my hope is that, you can think of self-serve as a resource. While we're not open to the public right now, we are doing curbside pickup, but our educators are always accessible to you via phone or via email. So if you try the Dilator and you're like, hey, I have questions, like call us, email us. We want to be there for you. We want to help you. And we're also just, we're waiting to open back up until we can do it as safely as possible. And now that we've got new employees and we're training and doing all the things, but we're still here for you in other ways. Yes, I see a hand up.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, all right. I literally completely had a job interview, like some other, so I really am sorry about this. I'm trying to find a job right now. So like,
No worries, that's
completely have
important.
I have not been in this whole session with anybody. So what I'm kind of finding a struggle with is after chemo and after menopause, I have like no libido.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've addressed this in your session or what, but you know, I haven't had a partner in 3 years. I don't mean to be TMI, but this is something that's it's worrisome. You know,
Yeah.
I'm 54 years old right now, so it doesn't mean my life is over, and it doesn't mean that people in their 60s and 70s their lives are over. But I just feel that it's just been a real problem with me as far as my libido and whatnot. And I am not allowed to take, just like the rest of everybody else in this group, we're not allowed to take hormones, bioidenticals. We're not allowed to have any aids. So I just really don't know really where to go from here. And I hate to jump in, like, because I haven't been in this whole session and right away I'm like, hi, I don't have any libido. But, you know, it's one of those things where I haven't wanted to bring it up in our group because people are going through other things that, like, the last thing that when you're going through breast cancer treatment, the last thing you want to deal with is your libido. But now I'm like 3.5 years out. It's like, hi, my libido is a problem. So I don't know really what to do here. I mean, I know that's hard for you to just kind of jump in and help me with this. So I just
No, that's fine. So what I'll do is I'm going to paste into the chat. The first thing I talked about was a yes, no, maybe checklist. And one of the things I encouraged everybody to do was sort of redefine sex and just expand the definition of sex. Because oftentimes our definition is so narrow that we think, like, if I'm not in the mood for like vaginal penetration, I must not be in the mood for anything at all. And most of the time that's not true.
I get it.
Yeah, so I put that link in there so you can check out, find a list that you like, fill it out, and then you can have an idea of if and when you do decide to have a partner, you can kind of know where to start. And then the other thing that I would say too is what I recommend for anybody who's like, I don't have a libido, but I want to have more of a libido.
I do want one. Yeah, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Masturbate more. Honestly, masturbate like it is your exercise routine. Like every, you know, a couple times a week, you find a toy that you really like. You find a toy that like is easy for you to use, that is functional for you. And oftentimes what people find is that if they are masturbating more, they find that their libido might increase a little bit as well, because it's kind of like, oh, like I've turned off this part of my brain and my body because there were more important things. You know, and then sometimes it just kind of gets left in the off switch, and you have to very intentionally like go back in and turn it on a regular basis to be like, hey body, remember this? We like this. This feels good, you know. And sometimes there's pain or discomfort, and we can definitely like address the pain and discomfort part with like lubrication and dilators, but really finding a toy that you really like and treating masturbation like your exercise routine or like brushing your teeth. Like it's something that you do on a regular basis, because there are very like well documented health benefits of masturbation, right? So
what
even
about,
if you
now what about atrophy?
Yeah, so that's the dilators. The dilator is going to be key for that. And this is the one, we have 2 dilator sets, but this one is actually a vibrator and a dilator. And it starts small. And then it's kind of like those Russian dolls where you can actually gradually put bigger pieces on it. And then you can go up as big as you want. But that really helps with the atrophy. And it's something that, you know, it's a process. It takes time. It takes regular therapy. But what I was saying earlier is really recommending to, like, you know, take a hot bath, you know, start really slow, start externally for the first few minutes, and then you can go internally if you want, if that starts to feel good. But with atrophy, the dilation is really going to be key. And then, you know, what I recommended for people was really like, don't focus on going inside quite so much, you know, really stay outside more, right? Stay doing external stimulation for longer. And then you might find that the internal stuff is a little bit easier to do because your body is warmed up, you know, and you've got all that blood flow going, and you've got all that relaxation and that muscle, that sort of those muscle contractions that happen as a natural part of arousal. That can kind of happen with the external stimulation.
So should we visit your store? Is that really a good, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I
Yeah.
just got in.
No,
So
you're right. I'll put just
everybody
the
doesn't know me
general.
very well in the group, but I'm just kind of like, let's just land the plane here.
Yeah, no need to apologize. I put our store link in there, and I'll actually also give you all a coupon code. This is HR 2021 will get you 10% off your order. So that's in the chat now. So you can feel free to use that coupon code if you do want to do some ordering. But yeah, we have, and a lot of this is actually also available at just selfservetoys.com/health, which I'll put that link in the chat as well. But if you wanted to do, we do like virtual shopping. So if you have, like, if you're like, actually, I have a lot of questions and I want to ask you more of these questions, we could do a virtual shopping appointment.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm sorry to come in and bounce in and go, hi, you know, like, hey, what about my libido? But I also know that some of the pills that we have to take to stave off our breast cancer also, you know, like I hated to hear this is so negative, I don't mean to say it, but my gynecologist had told me that the area down there looked like I was like 65, and I'm like, my God, are the pills doing that to me? You know, like what I'm taking to prevent myself from getting breast cancer. So I know it's negative, and I haven't wanted to bring this up in the group because so many people are really going through a lot of stuff right now. And that's the last thing they need to hear about is their libidos, you know?
Yeah, well, and I would say like a good lube can definitely help with kind of that, you know, how the tissue changes. It can help just to feel more comfortable. And then additionally, you know, like what regular masturbation does is it does really increase the blood flow to the area. So I'm not saying that it's going to like change that, or it's going to be like, oh,
I'm not
now
expecting you to be the magical, like,
right.
but
It's just that it's good to have blood flow.
You know, like, you know, our oncologist, I don't know, my oncologist just completely avoids the topic.
Yeah.
And so, you know, she just kind of is like, I don't know what to say. So, you know,
well, I appreciate your questions, and definitely, you know, you can definitely come visit us, and we can answer them more in depth as well. But I see a few other hands up, so I want to make sure we get.
Yeah, I know. Go ahead. I'm going to save your chat. Okay. So I'm doing it right
Great,
now.
great,
so go ahead
great.
and monopolize here. So
no, you're great. Thank you.
Hunter, it's Allison. I just wanted to ask real quickly. I know for a variety of reasons, there's some people who can't save the chats right now on this call. And so I was wondering if there's any way you could email and or text them to me, and then I will make sure to get the links out to everybody. You know, additionally, we'll post the recording. We'll post the recording on YouTube, but I know some people have been texting asking me for the links. So I just want to make sure we have a way to get those.
Absolutely. I will just paste them all into an email to you right now. And then I'll send that to you.
Great. Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Yeah. And then I saw another question as well.
Sorry, I'm like obsessed with lube apparently, but the
Great.
lube do you guys have flavored lube? Because
we do.
I know that we're all on medication, and I don't want to taste like pills.
Yeah, we do have flavored lube.
Oh,
yeah, we have some lubes that are flavored without like sugar and glycerin, you know, because often that's not good for the body. So we do have some flavored lubes that are actually taste good. I feel like so many of the like synthetic flavored things taste really like ick, but I actually do like some of the flavors of lube. So yeah, we do have some of those options as well.
Oh, okay, great. Because I don't want to taste like pills, but
absolutely,
I want to be taste.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, great. So what I did is I went ahead and I pasted all of these into an email. And then, like I said, the coupon code is capital H, capital R 2021. And that gets you 10% off an order at selfservetoys.com. All right. Any other questions before we send you off into the evening?
A quick question, maybe that'll be useful to anybody. So just because I worry about getting an infection, of like a vaginal infection, can you just tell like the best way to clean the toys and to store the toys?
Absolutely. So we'll send you home with a cleaning guide. So you don't have to remember everything I say right now, but I'll tell you anyways. So depending on the material, most of our toys are medical grade silicone, which means they can be cleaned and sterilized just with warm soapy water by washing it in warm soapy water for 3 to 5 minutes. If the toy does not have a motor, you can, and it's silicone, you can actually boil it or even put it in the dishwasher. If it's a hard plastic toy, like the Dilator, with this one, we consider it to be porous just because if it gets any scratches or anything on it, the bacteria can kind of hang out in those little crevices. You can always put condoms over your toy to keep them as clean as possible, and just put a new condom every time you use it. So that's a way to keep it, just to maintain a barrier. And then additionally, I just recommend washing with a very, very gentle, mild soap and warm water. We do have toy cleaner at the store, but a mild soap and like something that works well with your body. And just make sure you wash it off really well. You don't want any like remaining suds on the toy and then putting that inside your body. But I would oftentimes recommend wash your toys before use and after use. And that kind of helps keep them nice and clean. And we live in New Mexico, so there's dust and dog hair on pretty much everything in my house. So it's always a good idea to wash them first too. I have learned. Like even if it's in a chest somewhere, I'm like, how is there dog hair on this? Like, what the heck? But like without fail, it feels like it always happens. But yeah, we'll always send you home with a little care guide as well. Awesome. And then I know that someone had talked a little bit about like nipple stuff and like as foreplay. So I think a lot of the ideas on that yes, no, maybe checklist, like think of foreplay as like foreplay is part of sex. It's really interesting that culturally we've decided to like separate out foreplay from sex, because in my brain I'm like, they're all kind of the same thing, like it's like getting me, like for me, the foreplay is like someone texting me saying like, hey, when I get home, this is what I want to do to you. I'm like, that is foreplay to me, right? So like your foreplay might be totally different, but like maybe your foreplay is like a sensual massage, or, maybe your foreplay is like, using a hot wax candle and like dripping it on your body or something. So foreplay can be so many. And I know that we sometimes focus very heavily on like foreplay being about like certain body parts, and like maybe it's about nipples or maybe it's about oral sex, but we have a lot of erogenous zones on our body, and nipples just happen to be one of them. There's lots of other zones too that can feel really, really good when stimulated. So I would encourage you, to think about that yes, no, maybe checklist as like pretty much anything on that list could be your foreplay that, that you feel comfortable with, obviously. And we do actually have, we have just started selling them. We do have some breast forms. So if that's something you're interested in, we do have that. I'm trying to find, yeah, we have breast forms and bras for breast forms as well. So that's another thing. I'll just go ahead and put them in the chat. Okay, here we go. I'm trying to navigate our website and not lose the link, but here's the link for breast forms, and then I'll put it also in the email that I'm going to send you, Allison. All right, any other questions? All right, well, I really appreciate everybody's time and everybody's vulnerability. I'll also put my email in the chat in case you want to email me and give me any feedback. I love feedback. I love it when people tell me, hey, this could have been better if you did this, or, maybe next time you talk about this, like, don't use these words. Like, I love that kind of feedback. I know that I'm always on a learning curve and trying to do trying to do better always. So my email is there. You can feel free to email me. And yeah, just thank you all for being here today. Thank you for your vulnerability, and thank you for sharing space with me. It's an honor and a privilege.
Hunter, thank you so much for sharing your time and talent with our community. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I hope you all have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll get this up on our Pink Warrior House YouTube channel too, in case anybody wants to come back and review.
Awesome. Cool. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Rebecca.
Bye, guys. Have a good night.